Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. Patch 9.2.5 just came out this week with another round of changes, a lot for Mythic Plus as well as PvP. And with this tier list, I wanted to construct my thoughts on the ranged DPS in a PvP environment, mostly thinking about 3 versus 3 arena. What is going to give you the best odds of success? What's going to give you the best odds of finding a group from looking for group? And what's going to be the most suited main specialization or alt, because in this patch now you'll be able to buy the conquest boxes once again from a vendor in Oribos, mail those to your alts and start gearing up an alt. So this is a good tier list for you to sort of start thinking about what characters or specs you want to be playing at the start of this patch. So without further ado, let's get started here. I know that my most recent tier list for melee DPS may have drawn a little bit of controversy from some of the comments. I will have a link to that video in the next one as well. Do take into consideration that I am putting a lot of emphasis on versatility for these specs as well as competitive viability, because I think it is important if you're looking for a spec to main that you have a lot of composition options, so that when you're going into looking for group, you're spending the least amount of time there and the most amount of time in game, because the most amount of time in game is ultimately what is going to drive your success moving into the future. If you pick a spec but it only has one comp and you can never find a group for it, it could be a tough road for you. So take that into consideration. Also, if a specialization is positioned to the left, so for example, if I put Affliction here and Arcane here, this means that I do think Affliction is a better option than Arcane, while they are still both on the B tier. And we will say that B is, let's say, it's acceptable. Like you'll have some composition options. You will be able to make it work if you really put some effort into it. A tier is like solid. These are likely rank 1 viable specializations. And S tier is kind of like bonkers, off the walls, like crazy specializations. C tier is maybe slightly below average. You could really be a hipster. And D is likely to avoid. It's not going to be a great idea to pick it up. So here we go. We've got Affliction Warlock. This is a specialization that got some changes towards the Necrolord Covenant, but they also lost the Demon Armor component, much like every other Warlock spec. And it does seem like Warlocks are transitioning into Demonology to gain the benefits of Soul Link. And Demonology appears to be performing pretty well at the moment, especially as Night Fae and has a variety of compositions. Affliction, on the other hand, it's kind of disappeared at the moment. And I'm not sure if it's just the hype train for Demo at the moment. But you will feel a lot squishier into a lot of these physical damage dealers trying to escape Fury Warriors, trying to escape Necrolord Death Knights. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be a very hard trip. I think that there are a few wizard cleaves that you could focus on running with the Affliction Warlock, things like Mage as well as Shadow Priest, to try and combine them together. But I want to put it a little bit lower just because it's going to be really tough to survive a lot of those cleaves at the moment. Is this a fair assessment? I think you could make it work if you really wanted to. It doesn't. I can't right now for the life of me think of a comp where it's like, yeah, that comp could get rank 1 pretty easy. Like you're gonna have those teammates will really like playing with you. Like maybe Demon Hunter, Affliction Warlock. It's a really high damage spec. You can overwhelm teams, especially if you just want to like play at the mid-range ratings. I'm thinking when you get towards the top end of the ladder, it starts to really fall off. But if you're playing at a beginner level mid-range and you're just able to pump up massive damage with this spec, you can overwhelm a lot of teams. So maybe it's let's put it here. Let's be a little bit more kind to it. But it's definitely not bonkers off the wall, and I don't think it has like a solid, like this is a guaranteed rank 1 option for it. Beast Mastery Hunter, on the other hand, right now is doing insanely high damage. Unfortunately, it is limited in the comps. I pretty much only see Beast Mastery Feral Druid and Holy Priest as a composition. So if you are going into this specialization and you're looking to excel in PvP, you will likely in 2 versus 2, but in 3v3 you're going to be pigeonholed down to one comp. Its defense is very powerful against damage over time effects, but not very powerful against basically anything else. So for me, I think that holds it down from being the bonkers spec onto the S tier, because it does have those weaknesses and limitations in its versatility. But because it has Jungle Cleave, which is easily one of the best comps in the game, to get to rank 1, I think that it is still a solid pick. And if you really love Beast Mastery Hunter, you can make it work and you'll be able to excel with it. But compositions are limited. Arcane Mage, this specialization got some buffs in this patch. I don't know if it's enough to really put it onto the radar here. The main problem with Arcane is that you just get interrupted and then there's not really a lot going on, as opposed to the Fire Mage counterpart and even the Frost Mage counterpart. And you don't have a guaranteed way to get a sheep on a healer like a Dragon's Breath. And you don't have the same type of kind of control of the snares of Frost Mage to just kind of stand still and cast the whole game. I've seen a couple of teams trying to pick it up. Specifically like Windwalker, Arcane, but it's really not come online for me just yet. I would say that Frost is probably still closer to it. While it was nice that it got some attention, I think that the diehard Arcane fans will make it work. It does have Arcanosphere one-shots if you want to give that a go. But if you're pushing towards the higher upper end competitive level, I think the amount of shutdown that you're going to experience in Arcane is likely going to be pretty rough. It's probably middle of the pack. Again, I can't really think of a rank 1 comp that you could easily run unless you're just like the diehard Arcane Mage player, like which I know there are a few. I think it would be a tough time still with this specialization. You're going to want to focus on Wizard Cleaves, although you do have some versatility, actually. You can play with Double Spellcaster, I think. You can play with Windwalkers, a lot of melee DPS. You're actually very compatible. It's just that you're not hitting a certain threshold that other specializations are in terms of performance at the moment that's holding it back. Balanced Druid, this is a specialization I'm personally spending a lot of time with and having success. Really, the only thing I'm running into that's of particular challenge, like impossible challenge, is Outlaw Rogue, which is for everyone. So I don't know if that's like, you can like say Moonkin is terrible when everybody is suffering under the rule of the pirate lords. I think Balanced Druid is in a great position right now, has a lot of comp variety with Double Spellcaster, with melee ranged healer as well. Super fun spec right now. Has some options in builds with Necrolord and Kyrian as well. If you want to stay up to date with PvP guides and stuff like that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I think for me, Balanced Druid is an A tier at the moment. I think that Demon Hunter Boomkin Shaman is a rank 1 viable comp, and there's some other comps that are also really fun and competitive, so you'll have a good time with the spec right now. Demonology Warlock, this spec as Night Fae with the specific demon summoning builds. You're summoning in a giant legion of army of demons, as well as now having 25% healing reduction. So finally, your Mortal Strike is equivalent to the other Mortal Strikes in the game, has allowed Demonology to be the only range caster aside from Hunter. If we really, I guess we're including them on the range list, I guess they're range, but like a spellcaster to have such a powerful Mortal Wounds effect is increasing its synergy with other classes. It seems like the mage locks have kind of now evolved towards Demonology as opposed to Destruction. So I would definitely recommend, if you haven't tried Demonology, that you kind of switch over, because you're going to have way more versatility and viability as the specialization. Do I want to put it onto the A tier, though? This is why I'm thinking we might have to be mean. We might have to be mean, because I feel like Demonology probably does have like a rank 1 viable comp. I've seen Shadow Priest Demonology Warlock doing really well at the moment, Mage Demonology, Ellie Demonology, but it's not very clear if it'll be rank 1. So I feel like this is more of a fair assessment. You don't want to completely avoid these specs. Like, you can make them work if you want to be the hipster diehard fans of these specs, but right now I think this is a more fair assessment right now, actually, with Demonology in the middle of the pack. I also don't want this tier list to be just like all on one line, because I don't think it is the case like it is with melee DPS. And now moving on to Destruction Warlock. Destruction Warlock got some of the most heavy-handed nerfs moving forward. A lot of them made sense after the fact. With the armor removal, you will struggle. Demonology being the only lock spec with Soul Link means that Destruction will struggle the same way as Affliction with surviving these Unholy Death Knights, as well as Fury Warriors kind of gunning you down. You can still run the same types of comps of Frost Mage with Shadow Priest, but it's definitely noticeable in terms of its impact. I wouldn't say it's kind of the bulletproof free win composition that it was before. You will have to work a lot harder for it, and I think because of that, it's probably bottom of the B tier or a high C tier for myself personally. Maybe we'll just keep it as a low B tier for now, and we'll reconsider it as we go through the rest of the specs here, but definitely a low B tier. Elemental Shaman. This spec, I think, has been underrated. Its survivability, similar to Beast Mastery at times, can be really tough, especially Cleaves. But if you're pairing up with another caster that can assist you with that, like a Balanced Druid or a Demonology Warlock, I think the power of Elemental actually does unlock quite a bit. We saw it in the tournament have a success against Rogue Mage Priest. with Jamie playing it in the AWC. I feel like Ellie is it's really underrated, especially as Necrolord with this new Ascendance legendary. Very fun spec, keeping Flame Shocks up and just spamming out meatballs onto everybody. You can flex with melee DPS, flex with double range DPS. I feel like it's in a lot better of a spot than we're really giving it credit for. So I'm probably going to be giving it a bit of a higher ranking now. I think that it does have rank 1 viable options. And some versatility. It's super fun and does a ton of damage. Its weakness that doesn't put it on the bonkers tier would be as if it had outlaw survivability. If it had outlaw survivability, it'd be up there on the S tier, and I think that's what makes people maybe underrate it, especially because of how popular Fury Warrior is and Unholy DK, because it will struggle into those. But if you play it at a master's level with a good comp, like a Boomkin Ellie, because the Boomkin will complement the Ellie against the Cleave, I think you will start to have success with it, and you'll be able to climb the ladder. Fire Mage, we don't really have to talk about this. Fire Mage has been bonkers tier for like 5 years. I don't know if it's ever not going to be bonkers tier at this point. It seems to just be able to dodge everything. Even when it gets nerfed, it's still the most powerful, and this is because of its immediate crowd control with Dragon's Breath, its low cooldowns on all of its abilities with shifting power, and because of the low cooldowns, its enormous amount of healing. A lot of the times in tournament play and even on the scoreboard on the ladder, it's not capturing the amount of healing that Fire Mage is doing because Alter Time is not recorded. And Alter Time, if you've used it at 100% health, go to 1 and back to 100, that's maybe 100,000 healing not being recorded every time you press it. So they're doing exceedingly high healing with some of the most powerful crowd control, probably the most powerful crowd control in the game, and combustion, when you connect it, is almost always a guaranteed kill. So it's fitting perfectly into the meta, and that is a rogue mage meta. You will be highly desirable on this spec. It does have versatility to flex into other comps like double caster. I see Shadow Priest mage, but why would you when rogue mage is just so good, right? You really can't go wrong with this spec, and that continues to be the case in 9.2.5. Frost Mage, unfortunately, the nerfs to Frost Mage didn't really impact Frost too much specifically. Would have been nice to get some compensation towards Frozen Orb damage and Ice Lance damage. I talked about that in the changes that I would have liked to see, so that it wasn't just pigeonholed into only being Icy Veins Deathborn, but it still kind of is the case. It's mostly suffering because Destruction's power has gone down now, but I think switching over to Demonology and also playing with Balanced Druids can be a decent option for you as the Frost Mage. It's probably coming in still at about the middle of the B tier, and this is why it's good to assess these tier lists every once in a while and come back to them. Sometimes the spec was underrepresented and we didn't get to see many people playing it, but it actually was really good, similarly to my assessments of Outlaw earlier, but now seeing it play out. So keeping up to date with tier lists like this on the channel is a great way to make sure that you're always in the most competitive headspace and making the best choice for yourself. Frost Mage is still going to be kind of that turret, just spamming out frost bolts, doing as much damage as possible in those wizard cleaves. Don't really see it with melee DPS too much, so you will be limited. I think it's fair to say it's probably middle of the B tier now. Marksmanship Hunter, insane damage. I'm seeing like 56k aim shots. Like if you just want to pop, just big one-shot damage, Marksman is probably the spec to be. I would have said Vesper Totem maybe before this, but now after that nerfs to it, Marksman is probably the heaviest burst you can play in the game, and more frequent than Arcanosphere. You don't really see a lot of it. I see it mostly in kind of Blessing of Summer Paladin cheese comps, like one-shot comps. So it's tough for me to say that it's an A tier spec. It brings the same weaknesses as Beastmaster, where you are squishy to non-dot damage. Of course, if you're fighting dots, really good to be a hunter. You're just impervious to dot damage. But I think it's like a high B in overall competitive viability. And comp options, I think playing with rogues, subtlety rogues, Blessing of Summer, Holy Paladins, Rep Paladins, like these big bursty specs, and pairing them together and just KOing people is going to be the way to go with it. And maybe not the sustained damage compositions that we've seen in the past when Frost Mage was in a different spot. We saw a little bit of MM Frost, but even then, not super competitive. So very high B tier. If it's on the left, it's high B tier. If it's on the right, it's low B tier. And then finally, we have Shadow Priest. Now, Shadow Priest, not going to be the big burster, the big blaster like Marksmanship Hunter is, but you are a great support class for other specializations, such as Assassination Rogues, giving them their Vendetta on a shorter cooldown, so you really amp up their damage. And it seems specifically that Rogue and maybe Demonology Warlock, now I've seen a couple of those popping up at very high ratings, are going to be kind of your main go-to compositions for right now. Demo, and Assassination, but you're not going to be the hard carry. You're not going to be the one that's, making the Mimi one-shot clips and stuff like that. You're going to be much more support-oriented, much more sustained damage-oriented. If you min-max your damage rotation, you will be very high on the scoreboard. You'll have a lot of impact in the game, but you're not going to be the one that's sniping most of the kills. So if you want more of a support role, you want raw damage output, you want to be like helping your allies be the ones setting them up for the closer and getting the kills, Shadow is going to be what you want to do. In those comps, it is very powerful, and you are highly durable. You're one of the most durable specs in the game, aside from Windwalker monks. But Windwalker's not very popular right now. So at least on the ladder, you're not going to see it very much. So for me, I feel like it's probably better than Boomkin and Ellie in terms of competitive viability. Very close. That's why it's on the A tier, just in the middle here. And this is kind of my assessment for right now for versatility, competitive viability for the ranged DPS and PvP. We have Fire Mage is the best spec, BM Hunter, Shadow Priest, Boomkin, Ellie, MM, Demo, Frost, Destro, Aff, and Arcane. And this is the way that I'm seeing it play out so far on the ladder. If you're really diehard fan, you can probably make Affliction and Arcane work. The B tier, I think, has maybe one or two options. You could get rank 1 with these specs, but you're going to start to struggle a bit. And Demo, I'm still on the fence with it just being so new in terms of trying to bump up to A. Demo could easily be a dominant spec. I don't want to preface that moving into the future just because it is so early still. But these are my assessments if you're thinking about picking up an alt and what to expect from them. So I hope that this video was helpful to you. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will catch you in the next one.